Okay. Hello, everyone. Good evening. Thank you for joining us for tonight's workshop. Before we get started, did want to just go over a couple or a few instructions for you to participate. So as an attendee to this webinar, you'll be able to listen in with your computer audio. Alternatively, you could also call in using the above number and the webinar ID associated with this meeting. This is recommended if your internet feed is unstable. As an attendee, you will not be able to turn on your camera. However, there will be a question and answer session later on, and your questions can be submitted through the presentation via the Q&A portal, which is located at the bottom of your window, and they will be queued on our end. We don't recommend entering questions in the main chat as it might be hard to track them, and we will also be putting links in the chat for resources and other things that are mentioned throughout this presentation. If you would like to ask a question verbally, please use the raise hand feature. It will put a little icon next to your name and it would notify us so that we may be able to unmute you and you could say your question to your microphone. Lastly, if you call into the meeting via your phone, you could press 9 to raise your hand and 6 to mute and unmute yourself. And we will also be referencing the standard grant guidelines throughout this workshop, so you may find it helpful to have the guidelines opened in front of you to follow along. I will be putting the link to the standard grant guidelines into the chat right now, so feel free to be able to download it. It's also on our main website, and if you had RSVP to this workshop, you should have also received information to get this document. Additionally, we'll give you guys a few minutes just in case you want to download that and get yourself prepared. But if not, we will also have our workshop slides and presentation recorded and uploaded to our website. All right, and I'll go ahead and pass it off to Kristen to kick us off.
All right, thank you so much, Robert, and thank you to everyone who's joining us tonight. This is our second fiscal year 2023 grants informational workshop. So as Robert said, my name is Kristen and I'm the supervising program administrator. So I oversee our community safe clean water grants and partnerships program and our public art program. So we're really excited to share this year's funding opportunities, and throughout this presentation today, we'll provide you with tips along the way to help you develop a strong project proposal for the standard grants. But before we get started, I'd like to just start off with some introductions. So I will have our team introduce themselves and I'll start with Robert.
Awesome, thanks, Kristen. So hello, everyone. My name is Robert Marmito. I am the staff analyst with the Grants and Partnerships program here at Valley Water. I will also be leading the Valley Water Refill Station grant program, which we will briefly mention later on in this presentation. And I'll pass it off to Chelsea.
Thanks, Robert. My name is Chelsea Busick. I'm with the Community Benefits team as well. I'm our management analyst for our mini grants program. And I'll pass it off to Peggy.
Hey everyone, Peggy Lamb, Senior Management Analyst. I help out with the standard grant. And I'll pass it over to David.
Hi, I'm David Cahan. I am the risk manager here at Valley Water, and I will be a subject matter expert on all things insurance. And with that, I'll pass it back to Kristen.
All right, thank you, David. I will hand it off to two other subject matter experts we have on the line today. We'll start with Michael.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Turn on my camera for a second. Yeah, hi, good evening. My name is Michael. I'm a environmental planner with Valley Water, and I will be assisting with any CEQA related questions and environmental compliance questions for grants.
Thank you. And we also have Kevin.
Hi, this is Kevin. I apologize. My internet connection is kind of spotty, so I can't turn on my video. But I am an associate civil engineer working in the community projects review unit, and I'll be assisting with anything permit related that you may need from the water district.
All right, awesome. Thank you to our subject matter experts for joining us tonight. So we welcome all of our attendees and participants to take advantage, and feel free to ask any questions throughout the presentation. You don't need to wait till the end to get your question answered. Since it's a small group, we're happy to make it more conversational as well, but we do have our prepared slides that we can go through. And starting with our agenda. So our next slide is, as you can see, we have a lot to cover today. We do encourage you to follow along with that standard grant guidelines document that Robert was talking about earlier. And then no need to take any specific notes or anything. We are going to be posting all the materials from tonight, including a recording of this workshop on our website, hopefully by next week, on our standard grants webpage. And then just a plug for a future email you'll be getting is for a survey about tonight's workshop. So if you have any constructive feedback or compliments about the workshop, we hope that you can share those with us anonymously through our SurveyMonkey link, which will be posted at the end of the workshop. All right, so why don't we just dive right in? We can head to the next. Okay, so I'm not sure how familiar everyone is with the Santa Clara Valley Water District, but we are also known as Valley Water. We're a public agency that's a special district in the state of California. And we're most well known for being our Santa Clara County's wholesale drinking water provider. But we in fact have two other pillars to our mission. We also provide flood protection for our region's waterways, and then also create healthy creeks and ecosystems. So we do a lot of environmental stewardship work. As you can see, water touches all aspects of the environment, so we are very much involved. So you'll see there our mission and our three pillars. So all of our grant and partnership are revolving around those three pillars of our mission, and you'll see that throughout. All right, our next slide is about our grants and partnerships program. So just to give you an overview of where are these funds coming from that we are able to grant out. So our entire grants and partnerships program is funded through a special parcel tax that was most recently approved by voters in November 2020. And it's called the Safe Clean Water and Natural Flood Protection Program. And so within that renewed special parcel tax, there's a specific designation for a certain amount of funds to be granted out through grants and partnerships. And this is really our opportunity to leverage community resources, to partner with our community to try out new projects and further community-led projects throughout Santa Clara County. All right, next slide. So within the Safe Clean Water Special Parcel Tax, there are 6 priorities, A through F. All of our grant funding is available under priority F, which is support public health and public safety for our community. So if you see priority F listed anywhere, that is what it's referring to. It's referring to where it's located in the special parcel tax. All right, next slide, please. All right, and so within priority F, there are 9 different projects. All of our grants and partnerships, again, are under project F9. So that's where you'll see that nomenclature that we use, calling our grants and partnerships F9. And so under F9, there are 4 different funding opportunities. We have our standard grants, which you'll learn about today. We have our mini grants, which are smaller $5,000 grants, and they're available on a rolling basis year round. We have our refill station grants, which are $5,000 grants specifically for the purchase and installation of the water bottle filling stations where it has the top spout and you can fill a reusable water bottle. And we'll cover both of those briefly at the end of today's workshop. And then the other opportunity we have are our partnerships. So we have our standard partnerships and our small city partnerships, and those go through a different process. So you can contact us directly if you're interested in that sort of opportunity. But today we're going to be talking all things standard grants. All right, our next slide, please. Okay, so just a little helpful tip that we wanted to point out before we get really started is you'll see in the footer of a lot of these slides, there's a page number. It says standard grant guidelines, page 2 or page, whatever number. So we just wanted to point that out as a reference if you are following along with our standard grant guidelines. All the details and the fine print about what we're talking about on that slide will be on that page number in the standard grant guidelines. So we just wanted to show that we're being as transparent as possible. Everything that you see here today is also in that standard grant guidelines document. So this F9 standard grants. So there are 5 different project types that we are accepting applications for under our standard grants. We have water conservation research, pollution prevention, volunteer cleanups and education, wildlife habitat restoration, and access to trails and open space. And under the most recent renewal of the Measure S funding through Safe Clean Water, all of our grant project types are now consolidated. So there's one total amount for all the grants with no minimum or maximum amount per project. So although we have that flexibility now under the renewed measure, it's really unlikely that one single project will be awarded the entire grant amount that's available each fiscal year. So just keep that in mind when you're putting together your application. And then under this new renewed measure, all of our projects now have a 5-year agreement term. And so just plan for that whatever project you are proposing is able to demonstrate that it will be fully completed within 5 years. All right, so now to the most important part is the funding. What do we have available in the next slide? All right. So in this fiscal year, so in 2023, we have a total of $1.4 million in standard grants that are available. So that's the total amount. And from there, our Valley Water Board of Directors may approve full or partial funding of the grant request amount, and that's dependent on the grant funding allocation matrix, which we will go into more detail and further on in the presentation. And then it's because we do have a competitive process and we do typically receive more or applications that equate to more than the total amount available, so more than the 1.4 million. Just know that not all projects that meet minimum requirements are guaranteed to be funded. So again, we'll further on in the presentation talk about the criteria and the point system. And then we are always looking for diversity in our project types, project locations, and project sizes. So just know we are looking at the applications together as a whole as well.
We have a question in the chat. The question is, how many grants on average do we fund? And what is the typical cap of funding requests that we see?
So I would say last year was the first year that we had our standard grants under F9 all consolidated. So we have 1 year to go off of. And in last year, we think we received 22 applications. We awarded 15 that made it were awarded grant funding. And none of the 15 got 100% funding. I think a majority of those grantees got 80% of the funding that they requested, and then the rest got 50%. So that's just an idea off of our 1 year. I hope that answers the question. All right, can go on to the next slide.
Oh, it looks like we do have an attendee who raised their hand. So I believe it's Anne Ferguson. I'll go ahead and give permission to unmute yourself and you could ask your question.
Great.
Okay.
Hi, Anne.
Hello, everybody. Good to see your faces. So I have a question about the project types. So is it okay to have 4 project types in one grant application, or are you expecting us to have 4 separate grant applications?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So, a project, as we know, can have multiple benefits, and potentially have aspects of all of those project types in one, but you can only apply for one grant per project. So you will have to choose which project type criteria you're going to be submitting your application to be evaluated against. So what we recommend for projects that do have multiple benefits, that's always a plus. But it comes down to the point system and the evaluation, which we'll go over in more detail. So we would recommend you go through the standard grant guidelines and look at the point system and the criteria for each of the project types and see which one most closely represents your project. Because that's what they would use. So it's kind of based on the points at that time. Just to give everyone a heads up that we are currently undergoing a grants redesign effort, and our goal is to be able to restructure the current criteria and point system so that we can give extra points for those projects that do have multiple benefits. But until that's in place, we do have to work with our current criteria. Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay, great.
We actually have another question. I'll go ahead and allow Marty to talk.
Great. Hi, Marty.
Hello, thank you, panelists. I got a question. Is there a target? Are you guys looking at a specific target that you're looking for folks to clean up and provide, the area, like in South County? Are you looking at rural areas? Is there a target standard that you guys look at under your scoring point or system that you're looking to target? Thank you.
Are you talking about location wise? Are we looking for projects in certain locations?
Yes.
Yeah, so what we will usually do overall in the funding is the actual project location typically doesn't affect your evaluation unless it's specifically listed in one of the project criterias that it needs to be in a certain location, but I don't think we have that. But we do give bonus points to projects that are in disadvantaged communities, and we do have 3 different maps that you can map your project location against. And if it fits one of those mapped areas, then you will get the bonus points. There are 5 bonus points for that disadvantaged community project. We do look at the projects as a whole, and we try to ensure that every area in our county has a grant project, but if that doesn't, it all depends on who's applying as well. So if it doesn't shake out that way, it doesn't shake out that way. But we do use that criteria point system for the award recommendations. And we can go through that in more detail too further on in the presentation. Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. Are those target areas and maps in the RP or the
There are links to them because they are
Okay.
GIS maps on our website.
Oh, thank you.
So we also have links in the presentation today, and they're kind of small in the standard grant guidelines. They're like footnotes to the bonus point tables, but all of the links are there.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. All right, were there any other questions?
Not right now.
Okay. All right, why don't we move on to the next slide then? Great questions. Okay, so you may be wondering, can I apply? Am I eligible? So this year, our applicants are eligible if they're local public agencies, special districts, a 501c3 nonprofit. So that means that you have that IRS tax designation. We do allow applications from schools, public, private, or nonprofit. And then we only accept applications from for-profit organizations for the water conservation research grants only. So if you are from a for-profit organization, you will only be able to apply for water conservation research. All right, next slide. Okay, so this is the eligibility and is your project eligible for funding? So this applies to all of the project types, no matter what their criteria says. So everyone has, all the projects that we fund must be located in or provide service to Santa Clara County. All of our projects must demonstrate that the applicant or grantee is providing match funds of at least 25% of the total project cost. So that could be in monetary or in-kind contributions. Like I said earlier, all of our projects must be completed within 5 years. All of the and our eligible applicants can seek grant funding for multiple projects. So you won't be docked if you submit 5 applications, but you can only get 1 grant awarded for each individual project. All right, next question or next slide. So the ineligible projects and the things that we are not able to fund through our grants program is feasibility studies, master planning efforts, any mitigation projects, anything really that's like required by your organization legally to do. Any operations and maintenance of existing projects and programs, and any land acquisition. So all of those things are not eligible under our grant program. All right, next slide. Okay, so this is just a high-level overview of what our process is. I know we're already in January or now February 2023, but it does take a while for us to get through our process. So we did open our standard grant on January 11th. Our applications are due on March 10th. And that's by 11:59 p.m. and no applications submitted after that time will be considered. So we do encourage everyone to get a head start in looking at it and getting your application started early. This is the second workshop that we're hosting, and our next and last one will be on March 1st. So you'll see that there. And then once the applications close on March 10th, then what we do is, as our grants team, is we do an initial compliance check of all the applications to make sure they meet all of the minimum qualifications and they are not any of those ineligible project types or ineligible applicants. And then those that pass the compliance check, then we will move those forward to our subject matter expert evaluation panels, and each panel will be convened around each project type. So the 5 project types, they will review the applications using the criteria that's in the standard grant guidelines with those points. Their average score will make up the score for that application. And then we will use those average scores against each grant funding allocation matrix to make the percentage of funding recommendation to the board. And that staff recommendation will go to the board in May of 2023 at a public board meeting, and our Valley Water Board of Directors will make all of the award decisions at that time. Then after that, all right, so that's already taking us to May. So we can go to the next slide.
Before we do, I think we do have a question in the chat.
Oh, yes,
Um,
great.
So the question is, once a grant is awarded, do you consider grant revisions? And then there's also a second question, and I'll read it after the first one.
Okay. Yeah, so that's a really good question. So, like I mentioned last year, of the grants that were, applications that were awarded into grants, none of them got 100% funding. So we have, after that, we did have to work with all of those awarded grantees to reduce their scope, schedule, and budget to the amount that they were awarded. So yes, we did have to do some revisions after the award.
The second part to that question is, can a grant have an inflation adjustment clause?
Oh, that's interesting. So that's actually the first time somebody has asked that, but I know with especially recent inflation, that's an important thing to budget. I will say that when you're putting your budget together, just know that if it makes it into award and into an agreement, that anything that you put in your budget will have to have supporting documentation in order to be requested for reimbursement. So we will pay out the direct costs, and we'll go over the other aspects of the budget later in the presentation. If you do want to build in that inflation as part of your budget, what I would recommend is maybe indicate that what the actual cost is now, and then you can always submit like a supplemental narrative that goes along with your budget. What we provide are the minimum templates that we're looking for, but if you want to provide any other explanation or things that you would be requesting as a part of your award, that's different than maybe like what's in our standard grant templates, agreement templates after award, then I would recommend putting all of that up front. For direct costs, we typically don't include any markup. It's just, you show the receipt and we'll pay that out. For labor cost, we do allow reimbursement for up to 20% of benefits on top of any actual pay rates, and then a 10% overhead on top of that. But that's only applied to any labor hours from employees of the grantee organization. Does that answer the question?
I'll let them
Okay.
determine that in the chat.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah, we will also go through a sample budget toward the end of the presentation as well.
And then we have another question is, can we share why this project must be completed within 5 years? Is there a benchmark?
Can we share that?
Yeah, like why do we have a 5-year timeline for projects, for grants?
Oh, okay. Yeah, so we do need, because, these are taxpayer dollars, we do need to show results that are coming out of our grant program. And we do need to ensure that our projects are actually completed and that we're not awarding out funds that don't come to fruition. So actually before the renewed parcel tax, we had 3-year agreement terms. Actually, we have increased them to 5 years because we do understand that there's been a pandemic, there's wildfires, there's many things out of our control that has significantly impacted the type of work that we fund. So we've tried to build in some flexibility there for all of our grantees by adding those extra years onto the agreement term. I hope that somewhat answers the question, but yeah, we do get reviewed through the independent monitoring committee, who's the community oversight group for all of the Safe Clean Water funded projects. And so we do report out on the progress of every grant project annually. So they are expecting that we are able to close out the projects and the projects are completed, because every single year we're awarding out new projects. So it's more and more and more coming every year. All right, any other questions? Okay, then I think we can go to the next slide. All right, so finishing out the timeline here. So usually we will go to the board in May for those funding decisions. That's usually the second board meeting in May. So then we will give the notice of awards to all applicants, their status of award in June 2023. And then we'll typically, if you're awarded, we'll hold kickoff meetings with those that were awarded and immediately start working on the grant agreement. So, depending on the percentage of funding that you were awarded, we may need to, and most likely will need to work with the grantee to update the scope, schedule, and budget to match the amount that they were awarded. And then we will need to collect insurance. We will need to go through an environmental review process here at Valley Water. And we will need to have a legal review of the agreement. Then the agreement will be signed by both parties. And upon that time, that's when the agreement takes effect and we consider it an executed agreement. And from that point forward is when you can start your project and start requesting reimbursements. All right, so that's where we are in a nutshell, and I am going to hand it over to Chelsea to talk more in depth about each project type.
Thanks, Kristen. So the next few slides will introduce you to the project types as well as examples of past projects that we've seen to give you an idea of the diversity of the projects that we fund. As a reminder, and as Kristen mentioned, you can only choose one project type if your proposed project fits in multiple priorities. Pick the best fit based on the criteria and scoring information in the guidelines for each project type. So the water conservation research grants are for projects to study and test new or uniquely applied water conservation activities. Applicants are encouraged to undertake research projects of new, repurposed, or innovative water conservation programs and technologies. The primary goal of this is to identify water-saving devices and strategies that can assist Valley Water with its water conservation efforts. The funded project should be able to measure how much water is saved. This is the only project type that's for-profit organizations that can apply for. Again, this is specifically for research projects, and some sample projects include or could include development of water reduction devices, technologies, strategies, or methods, researching cost effectiveness of water conservation activities, and then development of educational or outreach materials to help community conserve water. So here's a sample of a project of dipper well replacements that were awarded to Fisher Nickel. You can read more about this project as well as all previously funded projects by visiting our grants project list that Robert will put in the chat. We also have some success story pages and other program information we'll put in the chat. On the next slide, we have pollution prevention grants. They are for projects that reduce contaminants, including emerging contaminants in surface or groundwater. Some of these sample projects could include public education to prevent and teach proper disposal of pharmaceuticals, auto products, gardening products, cleaning products, paints, light bulbs, battery, electronic waste, and trash. Some others could include initiating environmentally friendly gardening and composting techniques, such as to reduce the use of pesticides and PFAS containing products, and technical assistance to help growers protect groundwater and to keep agricultural pollutants away from surface water. and partnership with schools, communities, organizations to reduce litter and graffiti in our waterways. On the next slide, we have an example of a previously awarded pollution prevention project by the Regents of the University of California for their effective storage and composting of livestock manures project. Our next project type is the volunteer cleanups and education. These grants are for projects that support creek cleanup, education, outreach, and water stewardship activities. Unlike the pollution prevention project type, the volunteer cleanups and education focuses more on addressing litter that is already in or near our waterways with an education component. Sample projects could include providing education and outreach activities on the need for clean, effective creeks and waterways in under-resourced communities, organizing cleanups with volunteers from local public schools, developing and implementing curriculum around the relationship between water quality and riparian area health for local businesses and their employees. An example of a previously awarded volunteer cleanup and education project is the Guadalupe River Park Conservancy Watershed Education Campaign. We're now going to play a short video clip that highlights this very successful project.
Hi, I'm Joe Salvato, Deputy Director with the Guadalupe River Park Conservancy. We're right outside the Visitor and Education Center for the River Park and Gardens. We've been really fortunate to have Valley Water as a partner through their grants program. We see a lot of alignment between our mission and goals for community health and connecting people with nature and each other. And really, the project funding has allowed us to do that. We were able to restore our large aquarium in the lobby. It was dormant for a period of time, and through the grant support, we were able to reactivate it and reestablish two of the fish that you'll find in the watershed, crappie and sunfish.
My name is Ash Namdar, and I'm the operations manager at the Guadalupe River Park Conservancy. The grant has allowed us to deploy the Downtown Streets team to these areas. We work in partnership with them and send them out here, and they do a lot of the heavy lifting for us.
My name is Mel Sarmento. I'm the Education Program Manager with Guadalupe River Park Conservancy. I'm very grateful for the funding that we've received from Valley Water and the way that that supported our program overall. We had the opportunity to train our staff so that they were able to facilitate appropriate programming, whether that's developmental or appropriate for what they're learning in school, and making sure that we're supporting their education that way. Additionally, we were able to get this fantastic mural behind us. We wanted to really touch on the fact that when students were here at the river, which is actually our field trip access site, that they would be able to see the particular things large scale that they would actually be exploring themselves. Sometimes students don't have the opportunity to access a green space, and the fact that this is such a public and urban park that's located in central San Jose, it really encourages people to recognize that nature and river are not that far away, and it's accessible, and you don't need money to enjoy it.
When you pass by the park and over the bridges, you can directly see the impact of the work that's happening on the ground. When you see the litter be collected, the bags be picked up, people coming back into the park system, it was just more than ever, folks were looking for places to go. And we really felt like through the grant that we were able to respond to the need and support in a time when folks needed it.
People can ride their bikes, they can go on walks. It's not as impacted, and you could actually see a lot of the nature coming through again. There's a lot of green out here, and at some point in time, it didn't feel like there was. But with all the trash being picked up, things are looking a little bit brighter out here.
Our next grant opportunity is the Wildlife Habitat Restoration Grants. They're for activities like creating or enhancing wetland, riparian and tidal marsh habitat, protecting special status species, removing fish passage impediments, removing non-native or invasive plant species, and planting native species. We encourage you to look at the One Water document and other referenced documents in the criteria for this project that are also attached in the guidelines. Here is a quick example of a previously awarded wildlife habitat restoration project. This grant was awarded to the San Francisco Bay Bird Observatory for their Establishing Forster's Tern Nesting Sites project. Lastly, we have the Access to Trails and Open Space project type. The Access to Trails and Open Space grants are for activities that provide access to creekside trails, open space, or trails that provide a significant link to the creekside trail network. Sample projects include construction of a bridge linking two trails together, creation of a trail that provides a significant link to the creekside trail network, and activities that support urban trails and encourage community involvement. When preparing the scope of work and planning the project, applicants are encouraged to review the guidance for trail design, which is contained in the guidelines and standards for land use near streams. It has a list of constraints when working on trails projects on or near valley water facilities, along with other best practices for trail design. You can find the link in our grants guidelines. And our last example today is the County of Santa Clara's Calero Reservoir Oak Cove Trail Construction Project. Again, you can read more about these projects and our entire list of previously funded projects by visiting the links we provided in chat. And now I'll go ahead and hand it over to Kristen to go over the evaluation and funding process.
All right, thank you, Chelsea. Okay, so in these next few slides, we'll talk about the evaluation and funding process. So we went over that quick process before the project type criteria. And as we mentioned, the 5 project types have unique scoring criteria in the standard grant guidelines. So there's minimum requirements and then the project evaluation criteria table. And that has the point system that's associated with it, along with the bonus points. That includes the disadvantaged community bonus points as well. And then, as I mentioned, the subject matter experts will evaluate all of the applications based on those project evaluation criteria points, and then make the recommendations to the board depending on what the average point score was per application. So each project type has a different grant funding allocation matrix. So an example is shown here on the screen of a tier 1 and tier 2 scenario. So if a grant application got 85 to 100 points in this situation, they would be recommended for tier 1 funding, which could be 70 to 100% funding. And then if it was 70 to 84 points as the average score, they could get tier 2 funding, which could range from 30 to 69% funding. And if they get less than 70 points as their average score, then we would not recommend them for funding to the board. So we do encourage you again to go through the minimum requirements, project evaluation criteria, and the grant funding allocation matrix for your project type. And all of this is very transparent. It's all laid out in the standard grant guidelines, so nothing is a surprise. And so you'll see that our grant staff doesn't have decision-making authority, and we do not influence the scoring at all. We facilitate the evaluation panels, but we are not scorers or evaluators ourselves. They're done by our subject matter experts. So you just want to be very clear on what that process is in our grants team role.
Real quick, Kristen, we have a question. Just to be sure, for access to trails and open spaces category, this does not mean taking disadvantaged people out of the trails along creeks or open spaces.
No, the intent of that is to create new trails near or to expand the existing creekside trail network or create new open space. But you can take a look at the criteria for more about that. If you're looking at more of an educational focused project, The only project type that does give points for education is really that volunteer cleanups and education project type. I think it weighs educational components higher. But again, I would just recommend going through those criteria because you know your projects, better than we do. Did that answer the question? Okay, great. So we can go to the next slide. All right. So the next item is the bonus criteria. So for every single project type available, the bonus points are the same. So we do give 5 bonus points for each of these 3 categories, and it's either you get it or you don't get it. So it's either a 5 bonus points or a 0. So we have financial stability. So this is when the project's demonstrating that more than half of the matching funds come from a monetary source, so not in kind, and that you're demonstrating strong financial ability to carry out the project. The next is the first time applicant. So this is if you are a first time standard grant applicant or recipient. This would not include any mini grants or refill station grants that you've had with us before. And so you'd be eligible for 5 points if it's your first time applying for a standard grant. And then the environmental justice bonus points is if your project serves or impacts a disadvantaged community. So if we go to the next slide, this is where we have the 3 different maps that you can check to see if your project fits in that would get the bonus points for environmental justice. So we do use the low income households map, the low income census tract map, and then the disadvantaged community map that was created by Cal EPA. So if your project is located or serves a community that shows up on any of the 3 maps, it doesn't have to be all 3, it could be at one of the 3, then you would be eligible for those 5 bonus points. And the links I know are not hyperlinked on the presentation, but they're hyperlinked from the standard grant guidelines as well as in our frequently asked questions document. All right, next slide. Okay, so these are just some reminders about funding. Again, when you're putting together your budget, so you're not eligible to put any pre-award costs into your budget. So your time here tonight at this workshop or working on your application would not be eligible for reimbursement. Because again, these are taxpayer dollars from the parcel tax. All of our grant projects need to be open to the public, so we are not able to fund any proprietary work that can't be released to the public or have public access. And then if you are awarded the grant funds that you requested, then we will do reimburse or do payments on a reimbursement basis. So we will be accepting invoices once there's an executed agreement, checking the supporting documentation, and then providing the payment. And then it's just to note that in the standard grant agreement terms, we will be including that the final 10% of the grant award amount may be retained until the full project is completed, not just the items that were requested for reimbursement through the grant. Okay, ready to go to the next slide? All right, so now we can get into what a good and a strong proposal includes. And so the proposal, we really mean that grant application. All right, so for the proposal requirements, well, I'll first start off with saying that the entire application and all of these items are listed in our Flux Grants Management System. So there's a link to our Flux Grants Management System from the standard grant guidelines as well as from our grants website. Once you go to Flux, you're going to have to create an account. If you are new to Flux, it might take a couple days because we do need to check that all your information is accurate, and then we will approve your registration. Once you're in, you can reset your password. You'll have a username, login, and a password. You'll come in, and then there will be different applications that you can choose from to start. So you would select the fiscal year 23 standard grant application. You would click that button and it would go to the online application that's in Flux. So that online application includes basic information about your organization, about the project. It includes specific questions that need to be responded to in a narrative format. So please make sure you answer all of the questions that are in the Flux application. And then there will be a section to upload documents. Those documents to upload are going to be the project scope, schedule, and budget. And there are templates that you can download from Flux, which we will also review today. If this applies to your organization, you would need to see a resolution from the governing body. So if you have a city council or a board of education or board of directors, we would need to see a resolution from that governing body saying that they approve the application for the grant funds, and if they're awarded, they will move forward with the project. We do have a template of what that resolution language needs to include that would meet our criteria. And so that is downloadable on our website as well as from the Flux application. If this applies to you and you are a 501c3 tax exempt under the IRS tax code, we do need to see the 501c3 determination letter. That again would be uploaded into the Flux system and attached to your application. W-9 forms, Form 990s, audited financial statements, your organizational budget, and then all the resumes of key staff that would be working on the project. So a good rule of thumb is if you have, 5 different staff members, you don't need to include their names in the budget, but we do need to see their resumes uploaded to the application. But in the budget, if there are 5 staff people who you're going to request reimbursement for, we would expect to see those 5 resumes shown uploaded to the application. And again, we do have templates and resources related to some of these items, and they're indicated in that Flux application.
We have a quick question in the chat. Marty, can I actually have you ask this live? I want to make sure I don't get it wrong. I'm going to go ahead and allow to talk.
Hi, thank you. Is this a fee for service grant? In other words, it's all reimbursement. You don't get the grant amount. You have to invoice you all to get paid back. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes. The standard grants are all reimbursement based. So we don't give any funds up front for standard grants. For our mini grants and our refill station grants, which we can talk about later on in the presentation at the end, those do provide 50% of the funds up front and then 50% after the projects are completed.
Thank you. And my second question is that you said audited financial statements. What if you're not at the bar under the IRS guidelines? You have to be at a $2 million mark or $1 million mark, and a lot of agencies are below that, so they're not needed. Would a financial loss statement suffice, or what would you put in place of an audited financial statement if you don't have it?
Yeah, I would recommend that if you have that sort of explanation that you write that out and attach that as well. I would recommend the more explanation or the more information that you can provide, again, because it's going to be our evaluation panel that reviews it. The more you provide, the more they'll understand your organization or your project, and that will help in the evaluation.
Thank you. And the last question, going back to the fee for service, is your process you bill out every quarter, 3 months, or is it every month, or do we work that out in terms of?
Oh,
That's
yeah,
interesting.
yeah. So we do have some flexibility, but we can do it as often as quarterly.
Thank you.
All right, great. Are there any other questions?
No.
Okay. All right, well, we can get to the project scope. So we don't have, and this project scope is going to be a narrative and it's going to be attached to your Flux application. So you will write it in like a Word document or other document and then upload it into Flux. So this project scope is going to need to include a project summary, describe the project location, the community served and any demographics, talk about any project partners and what your relationship is with those other organizations, if there are any involved, and then detail out your project using tasks. So we typically will recommend that you have maybe a description of the approach of your project and then breaking it down into smaller segments. The task could be based on what the deliverables are. They could be based on time. So it could be planning, design, and construction as your task 1, 2, 3. It could be, one of them is going to be outreach, or another one is going to be the educational component, and the other one's going to be the litter pickup. And we do strongly encourage that everyone includes like a project management or administration task in there as well. And that, could be for putting together invoices and reporting, or, doing any other administrative activities related to the other tasks. So we do also recommend that you try to keep the task as simple as possible. And then in the task description, in their metrics and the deliverables, include more detail. But, it's better to have maybe like 5 broader tasks or 3 broader tasks than it is to have like 20 tasks, just for the simplicity of it. And then if it is applicable for your project type, we will be looking for any project operations, maintenance, and monitoring plans. And so, for example, if you're doing vegetation removal and planting native plants, we want to make sure that there's a plan to keep those plants alive beyond the life of the grant agreement. And then describing the project team. So here you'll describe what the role is of everybody, and of those people, all of their resumes will then be attached to the Flux application. And so there is no strict template that we have for this project scope, because every project's different. Everyone's going to want to include different information. Some people may have maps. Some people may have links to curriculum examples or links to videos of prior projects that are similar and things like that. So it's okay if your project scope, has a different format, as long as it really hits all of these different sections. And then what we do strongly encourage is you have your project scope and compare it with the project criteria for the project type you're applying for, and make sure that everything that's listed in the criteria is explained in some way, shape, or form in your project scope. Some past applicants have actually just copied the project criteria from the project type that they're applying for, and then writing a specific explanation next to each one to be very explicit. That's not required, but just so you know that if you choose to do that or want to do that, you can. But the project scope is going to be really the meat of the application itself. So again, like, we were just chatting with Marty, that more information is better than not enough. All right, we can go to the next slide. And this one is about the project schedule. So the project schedule needs to be a separate document from the project scope. And it's really going to be the document that shows the same tasks that were in the scope. So that you'll use the same tasks, such why the simpler the better, and then putting together a realistic time frame. So we do want to see, and this will help demonstrate that your project can be completed within the 5-year agreement term. So some assumptions that we would recommend that you use is that, as you can see, you won't know if you're even awarded funds until May, and then from June all the way through the fall, sometimes to the end of the year, it takes us to execute those agreements. So we advise that your schedule maybe doesn't start until December 2023 or even January 2024. And then you can use any format that you would like for the schedule. Typically a table format works well. All right, our next slide. All right, is the project budget. So this project budget, we do have a template, and this template is downloadable from the Flux application. I think it's also on our website as well. So again, the same tasks that you listed in your scope is going to carry in your schedule, and it's also going to carry into your budget. And so again, all of the costs that are shown in your budget should be realistic estimates. We do have our subject matter experts who are doing the evaluation, so they typically know industry standard rates. So I'd advise not padding it too much. They may think that it's not realistic. And then just know as well that your grant award amount will never be increased once the board makes their award decision. So make sure it counts for something that is realistic for your project. And then in the project budget, and we can go over this more, it's a lot easier to look at this spreadsheet together, but the budget does include what the total project cost is going to be, plus any other project contributions, and then also includes what you would be requesting reimbursement for under the Valley Water grant request. So it is all encompassing for the project budget. And then we do need to, we will use that budget to come up with that bonus points for financial stability and to ensure that the project meets the minimum requirement, which is the 25% match. We do also have the standard value for volunteer hours that would be counted as in kind. There is a link to that, I think, in the standard grant guidelines as well as in the FAQ, and that is a set rate. I think it's like $34 and some change for what that value of volunteer hours is. And then just as a reminder as well, that for the projects, the minimum qualification for all of the project types is that at least 80% of the funding must go toward implementation or construction. So that means actually something's happening. It's not like a planning task. All right, so I think what's going to make it a lot easier is if we look at the budget template ourselves. So Robert, do you mind pulling that up? Okay, thank you. All right, so what I'm going to do is, this is the budget template that's in Flux that you can download, and it will be a blank template. There are some formulas already built in here, but we do, encourage you to double check. I'm going to orient ourselves by going left to right and then top to bottom. So you'll start on the top left, add your organization and your project title. And then moving across the top, that first gray column is the total project cost. So that includes the grantee partner contributions, other project contributions, and the district funding requests, the Valley Water funding requests, which are the 3 columns broken out to the right of that under total project cost in the dark blue. So those 3 columns add up to that gray column. And then of the Valley Water funding request in column C, that is further broken down into the different tasks to the right in those 4 columns in the light blue district funding only. So these tasks will be tailored. You will put in which tasks those are and add in any further columns if you have 5 tasks, or you'll delete a column if you have 3 tasks. But those task names are going to be the same ones that are in your scope and the same that are in your schedule. And so those tasks show the breakdown between the line items in correspondence to the task. Those light blue columns will add up to that district funding request. All right, now the next.
We have a question in the chat. Is this example in flux? Is the budget example in flux?
No, this this example is not in flux. But I think we do have this in the slides that we will be posting, and we will be posting this recording as well. All right. So you'll see the first section is the personnel services. So what goes in here are any labor hours that will be performed by direct employees of the grantee organization. So if you have employees that are you're going to be requesting their pay for reimbursement for their time spent on these grant activities, you will list them here. We recommend doing it by classification or their job title, adding their direct hourly rate, the number of hours, that will come out to the total amount. We are allowed to pay up to 20% on top of that pay rate for their benefits. Then the salary and benefits will be calculated in the total project cost gray column. That total there is then going to have a 10% indirect overhead on top of that is what we allow. And then it will produce that next grant qualified overhead of the 10%, and you can see how it's split out amongst all the tasks there. So that line or row there does not require any supporting documentation because we do allow that as part of our grant program. All right. If you have any subcontractors or you are working with a partner organization that is not who we have the agreement with, but they will need to invoice you for their labor hours, and that would be under other costs, along with any direct costs. So things that you're purchasing. In this example here, there's garbage pickers, gloves, garbage bags, outreach materials. So, you can put unit cost, unit of measure, number of units, amount, put as much detail as you can that you know about this time, and then you can break it out between the tasks here. If you put a subcontractor or a partner, contributions like through their labor hours, what we would look for as supporting documentation would be like an invoice from them to the grantee organization. Whereas here for the other direct supplies, we would be looking for like receipts. And then under other contributions, this is a good place to put any in-kind contributions. So for example, you'll see volunteer time is listed here. At the time the sample was made, it looks like the value using the link that we provided shows $24. I think it's up to $34 now. And then you would calculate how many hours of volunteer time is estimated for the project, and then put the value in there. So that's how we orient ourselves to this budget template. We know it's pretty detailed and can be confusing, especially your first time looking at it. So our grants team is here to help you understand how to use this template. So feel free to reach out to us. We can't advise you how to do your project or what information to put in here, but we can help you figure out and fix any formulas or anything related to this template. All right. If there aren't any questions, we can go to the next slide. Okay, so we can go on to, I guess I'm handing it off to you, Robert, for the CEQA compliance.
Awesome. Thank you, Kristen. All right, so yeah, moving on to environmental compliance, Valley Water must comply with the California Environmental Quality Act, also known as the CEQA. So the CEQA requires Valley Water to analyze a project's potential environmental impact. The CEQA is complete when the lead agency has filed a notice of determination, or an NOD, or upon documentation that the project qualifies for an exemption. So please be reminded that only a CEQA planner can determine the CEQA review that is required and not grant staff. The grantee should provide completed CEQA documents with their application if it is applicable and if it's available. Or they must be able to provide the following details in their application, which is the project locations and access routes, any species and habitats that could be affected, ground disturbing activities, the work schedule, and potential environmental concerns that may exist. As a tip, provide as much detail as possible so that you don't lose any points and so that there's less back and forth later on in the process. If you do have a CEQA review started or completed, we recommend that you provide it even if you or Valley Water are not the lead agency. Another thing to note is that the size and the cost of the project is not necessarily indicative of the required CEQA review, since each project is unique. All right, so a completed CEQA review is not required prior to grant proposal submission or award. However, proposals that are further along in the process of CEQA review may score higher than those that are not, based on the evaluation criteria in the grant guidelines. So again, if you have done like any CEQA research, inquiries, permits, studies, or anything of the sort, it is always a good idea to include that with your application. All right, moving on to our next compliance requirement is our permits. So Valley Water requires that the grantee has proper permits before starting project activities on privately, publicly, or Valley Water owned property. Applicants who can show progress in obtaining the required permits are given more points based on the evaluation criteria in the grant guidelines. So if you have any permits or permit applications that are in progress, please also include those in your application. Our Community Project Review Unit, also known as our CPRU, conducts the permitting reviews. Please contact us if you have any questions about permitting. Similar to CEQA review, only the CPRU or the permitting agencies can do this type of review and not grant staff. So please provide as much detail as you can when you do submit any type of information regarding permits. Again, you should provide completed permit documents with your application if applicable, or be prepared to submit them to Valley Water prior to performing the scope of work. Moving on to our last requirement, we do require insurance for the entire agreement term. So on attachment 4 in the grant guidelines, it lists out the different types of grantee insurance requirements. You can send this attachment to your broker to get a quote and an idea of how long it will take to get all of those endorsements. So depending on the size of your project and the project type, the insurance requirements may be adjusted as needed on a case-by-case basis. All insurance endorsements require approval before executing an agreement. So once you submit your insurance to us, Valley Water does need to conduct a review to approve it and to ensure that it meets all of our agency's requirements. All right, and so that concludes the proposal requirements. Just as a reminder, again, you will need to submit your application with your proposal documents in Flux, which you see here. So this is our landing page of our grants management portal. I did drop the link in the chat for you to go directly on there, or the link is also found on our main grants webpage. So if your organization is already registered, but you haven't registered for a profile under your name, you will need to do that the same way that you entered your organization information. Page 55 of the grant guidelines also gives a great step-by-step instructions on how to register. So you could feel free to go ahead and create your account now and register your organization. If you do have any questions or need help navigating the portal, please feel free to reach out to us, and we'd be more than happy to help. We are available to meet over Zoom to assist and provide you that walkthrough.
I have a quick question in the chat. Do you need permits too for a program to educate youth, clean and remove trash? And is there a cost for this permit?
I'll give it off to Kristen to answer that.
Yeah, I think that all will depend on the location of where you're planning to do any physical work. So typically, if it's at a county park, depending on if it's near a waterway or a reservoir, you might need a permit from Valley Water, but you would typically need a permit if it's an organized event from the county parks department at the County of Santa Clara. Same thing would maybe go to like a city owned or operated park or any park in another jurisdiction like Mid-Peninsula Regional Open Space District or other place. Sometimes depending on where there are power lines and things, you might need a permit from like PG&E. So it all kind of depends on where your location is. For Valley Water permits, so if you are planning a project that's going to be on Valley Water fee or easement, so fee is when Valley Water is the property owner, easement is like Valley Water has rights to that property but doesn't own it. So for example, PG&E has a lot of easement. Any land located underneath their power lines, they have easement for, and so that they can conduct maintenance work. We typically have easement along a lot of trails throughout the county to do maintenance work of the creeks. So if it's Valley Water for your easement, you will need a Valley Water permit through our CPRU team. And if you are a grantee, so you've been awarded a Valley Water grant, then all the permit fees are waived for the Valley Water. Okay, hope that answered the question.
Awesome. Thank you, Kristen. Moving forward to some important reminders. So we do encourage you to, again, read through the grant guidelines. All the information presented on our slides can be found in that document. We also do encourage you to develop your proposal using the criteria in the grant guidelines. The funding recommendations and their amounts are all based on that criteria and the grant funding allocation matrix. The criteria within the grant guidelines are what our evaluation committee will be using to evaluate your proposal. So you will be able to see the exact point system, the criteria, as well as the allocation matrix used in making the funding recommendation to our board of directors. Another reminder is to include all required proposal documents listed in the grant guidelines and to submit your proposal through Flux as directed. We also do encourage you to review our frequently asked questions, which we will be updating and which we should also have located on our website. And our biggest advice is to also begin your application early. This will give you time to reach out to us if you have any questions or if to attend our final workshop, which is on March 1st, with any other questions that you may have. Just as a reminder, proposals will not be accepted after the due date and time. All right, and now I'll go ahead and turn it to Chelsea to provide some more information on our other grant opportunities.
Thanks, Robert. So in addition to our standard grants, we have 3 other funding opportunities. The first one here that's on the screen is the mini grant program, which are $5,000 grants per project that are available year round or until funding has been dispersed, and we have $100,000 available for mini grants that resets each fiscal year. These smaller grants are meant to provide seed funding to encourage community engagement and activities that further safe clean drinking water, water conservation, flood protection, and environmental stewardship in Santa Clara County. The mini grant application must be submitted into Flux using a more streamlined process. And unlike the standard grants, it is not reimbursement based. So you'll receive 50% of the funds upfront, and once you've been approved, we execute your agreement, and then the remaining 50% once you have completed the project and submit the final report. We just dropped the link in the chat. Thank you, Robert, if you want to navigate to our site about mini grants. And our last slide is refill station grants. This funding opportunity is structured very similarly to mini grants. The refill station grants are $5,000 per project. It's based on the location of the installation and is available year-round until all funding has been dispersed. We have $100,000 available for refill station grants, which resets every fiscal year. And the purpose of these grants is to provide funding for the installation of water bottle refill stations to expand drinking water access throughout Santa Clara County, especially in economically underserved communities or locations serving school-age children and students. It is a streamlined application and agreement process. It is also not reimbursement based, so you'll receive the 50% of the funds up front and the remaining 50% once the installment is complete and final items are submitted. The $5,000 is the full award amount, so it can cover the purchase of a refill station unit, the installation costs, and future maintenance. We're also dropping that website link in the chat if you want to learn more about this opportunity. And we have a question from Marty. Can you apply for both mini grant and standard grant at the same time?
Yes, you can, as long as they're for different projects. So you can submit as many applications as you want, as long as they're all different.
Thank you, Kristen. And lastly, our third opportunity is the small city partnerships, which we don't have a slide on, but the funding for this opportunity varies and allows us to partner with small cities on projects or programs that further the safe, clean water priorities. Please reach out to us directly if you have any questions about this opportunity. And what you'll see on the screen is our contact information. Feel free to email or call us with any questions. Our email inbox is checked daily, so that's the quickest response. If you have questions unique to your project, please feel free to schedule a meeting with us using our Calendly link in our website, which is our online scheduling tool that finds the best times to meet with any of our staff. And again, for transparency, we cannot review your application before submittal or tell you if your project will be awarded. That's up to the evaluation panel to recommend and ultimately the board to decide. But we can provide general guidance and clarify any of the requirements needed for your proposal or clarify anything from the grant guidelines. And lastly, please fill out the workshop survey using the Survey Monkey that we attached in the chat. We'll also email this link following the workshop, and your feedback will help us improve our future workshops. This concludes our presentation today. Thank you for joining us. But before we end, we have some time to answer questions. Feel free to raise your hand and ask them in the Q&A box. And we also have our evaluation panel members here if you have any questions about CEQA, insurance, or permitting. So feel free to ask any questions in the chat or raise your hand. If not, thank you for being here today, and we look forward to work with you if you end up applying. Have a great rest of your night.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. We hope to see your application soon.